With recent enhancements to the homebrew scene, supposedly now is the best time to dive into picking up a used Vita. So in this video, I'm going to be going through my experience of picking up a used Vita, hacking it, playing some of the games, playing some of the old Vita catalog, and letting you guys know if I think now is the best time to pick it up or if buying a Vita isn't worth the investment. Let's get into it. So I've had about a week and a half of time to hack this bad boy, play some of the games, mess around with some of the new features you can utilize from homebrewing it. And I've got a lot of thoughts on not only the system, but the process in general. We're gonna go through a few different things. I'm gonna start off talking about my experience with hacking the system and if I would recommend it to someone who currently owns a Vita. Then I'm going to go through just talking about the Vita catalog in general. If I think it holds up today, if it's worth playing versus some current gen games. And then finally, I'll wrap everything up talking about if I recommend buying a used Vita, if I recommend hacking it, as well as what are my overall thoughts with playing a Vita in 2023. Starting off with the hacking process. And I'm someone who has hacked a 3DS. I've hacked a Wii U, hacked a PS3. I'm someone who really enjoys putting homebrew software on my devices where it's an option. And I've got to say, out of every system that I have homebrewed and hacked before, the Vita was by far the easiest one to do. Typically, homebrewing a system is going to involve some type of PC or an external system where you can download some software, put it on some type of USB or hard drive, and then plug that into your device, move that file and start the homebrewing process, turning the device on and off, messing around with some settings, things like that. And if I had to rate this from 1 to 10, as far as 10 being the most complex, 1 being the easiest, I would probably give this a 2. Yes, there's some ways you can mess it up and there is some risk involved, very slight, but the process was so easy. It literally took me less than 10 minutes to finish it. I'll put the guide down below of which guide I use to hack mine. I typically follow Retro Gamecore. Russ is one of my favorite YouTubers and he usually does great guides on his website. Hacking the Vita literally can all be done directly on the device. You go to a URL, let the system download some software from that website, and then you let the software do its magic. It was so streamlined, it was so simple. I was just genuinely shocked at how smooth of a process it was. So as far as some of the things you can expect to be able to do when you have a homebrewed PS Vita, obvious ones being able to transfer files between a computer and your Vita using your IP address, being able to access your save data, upload new save data maybe from someone else's device. A lot of the standard things you'd expect when it comes to homebrewing a system, getting access to the full PS Vita catalog, the PSP catalog, the PS1 catalog. All those standard features that you get with homebrewing a device are going to come with the Vita. If that's something that you're interested in, I cannot recommend hacking a Vita enough. It was such an easy process. The instructions on a guide like the one that I'm going to link below makes it a foolproof process. Another thing that makes hacking Vita especially worth it is through utilizing one of these. This is a device that lets you put a micro SD card in it, put it into your Vita game slot, and utilize that SD card as actual memory. For those of you who aren't too well aware of the Vita in general, one of the biggest aspects to its downfall was the fact that Sony had its own proprietary memory chips specifically designed for the Vita that really made purchasing and expanding your memory more pricey than it should have been. Whenever they stopped production, they skyrocketed in price. Some geniuses, with the use of this device as well as through homebrewing, figured out a way to put a micro SD card into this little chip that slides into your Vita's game slot, and now lets you use that as a memory card. That right there alone is going to be one of my biggest reasons why I would recommend hacking it, is because how easy it is going to be to expand your storage. Another thing that I just absolutely love with homebrewing these devices, especially with my 3DS, is getting access to custom themes. The community really just takes flight when it comes to customization on these homebrew devices, and there's so many awesome themes that you can take advantage of once you homebrew your Vita. That's just another one of those aspects where I absolutely love taking advantage of whenever I can on a homebrew device. Really, if you have a Vita and you aren't opposed to, some of the quote unquote gray areas of legality when it comes to homebrewing a device, in my opinion, it is a no-brainer. It really opens up your capabilities on the device, being able to customize the theme, being able to customize the layout, like your launcher, getting access to the full catalog, getting access to your save data, and being able to upload and transfer new save data. There's so many new options that you get when you homebrew that it's pretty much a no-brainer for me when it comes to that. So now let's move on from the hacking process and touch a bit on just playing games in general on the Vita. So on the Vita, you can play obviously PS Vita games. You can play PSP games. They look really great on the Vita because the Vita screen is exactly 2 times the pixels of the PSP, so the upscaling works very well. And then you can also play PS1 games. Right there you have access to a ton of great games when playing your Vita. But when you homebrew it, you also get access to other emulators. You can play Super Nintendo, you can play N64, you can play anything below that. So the Vita is a pretty powerful, sneaky powerful handheld emulator. I will say if you're looking for like an all-encompassing handheld emulation device, I wouldn't recommend the Vita necessarily. I'd probably point you more in the direction of something like the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus for around the same price. Although on that, you won't be able to play Vita games as well. The point I'm making is you have access to a ton of games on this system. And something that a lot of people aren't aware of is that the Vita had a lot of collection titles like Sly Cooper Collection, Ratchet and Clank Collection, God of War Collection, where you can actually play the PS2 game on the Vita. There's some of these ports where I think the collection is done pretty poorly. Like for example, the God of War Collection. I tried it out. The frame rate was just so bad on God of War 1 and 2 that I just didn't think it was worth the experience. So I'd rather play it on like my PS3 or even my Steam Deck. There's a ton of games you have access to. However, since the Vita wasn't as successful as Sony expected, a lot of the great gems that were on that system actually ended up getting ported to different consoles and different systems where you can play the games. There's a few instances where there are exclusives that are stuck on this device, such as, Killzone Mercenaries, Uncharted Golden Abyss. There are some great Vita exclusives that are stuck on this device. And so if you are a huge Sony exclusive fanboy, that alone I think is worth having a Vita. Mainly, 1, because they are cheap, and 2, because it's the only way you're going to be able to play them. With that being said, there are a lot of the great games that are on the Vita that got ported. One of the most popular games on the Vita, Persona 4 Golden, is now pretty much accessible anywhere. So that's something to keep in mind is if you're looking for like an end-all be-all handheld system, there are a lot of the great gems in the Vita are playable on other devices. So something to keep in mind. However, if you are a fan of JRPGs, if you're a fan of visual novels, especially, the Vita is stacked with visual novels. If you're a fan of platformers or indie titles, or just PlayStation exclusives in general, the Vita is such an underrated console. There's a reason that this system has such strong following, and it's because of how well the system was designed, how sneaky good the catalog was, and how many great indie games were on this system. I would say look into the catalog, see if there's some specific games you have in mind that you do want to play. With that being said, there is a lot of awesome games and a lot of awesome experiences to be had on the Vita. All right, so to wrap this up, first of all, my experience on buying a used system from Japan, 10 out of 10 recommend it. The system looks brand new, weirdly smells really good. I don't know what they did, but it smells really good. Came in great condition, and I couldn't be happier with my purchase. Since it was from Japan, it came out to around $110. It was a very competitive price. Really, the only downside to having like a Japanese Vita is that when navigating through the home screen, the settings, the X and back button are actually swapped in Japan. But once you homebrew it, you can change that back. But just something to keep in mind, there really isn't a lot of downsides to buying from Japan. And 2, how I chose to go with the Vita 1000 versus the 2000 models. I've seen people say that the downside of the 1000 is that the OLED models don't age too well. And I can see that with mine. I can see a small, like little watery damage. It's not actual water damage, but the way that people describe the OLED screen aging effect is that it kind of looks a little pixelated, like almost like it has water damage. Even with that, I think the OLED looks so good. And I love like the heft and weight that the actual Vita has. Really, it's going to be up to you as far as if you want to go with a 1000 or a 2000 model. The 2000, thinner, more portable, has a great screen, and also has a lot of really cool colors. It's going to be up to you. Do you prefer the OLED? Do you prefer like the metal? Or do you want something that's more travel friendly and a more future-proof screen? 2, on hacking it, no brainer. If you have a Vita, I cannot recommend hacking it enough. And then 3, on the catalog, that's really where this is going to become a personal decision for you. Are there specific games on the Vita that you want to play on the system? Are you just a fan of handheld gaming and this is another device that you want in your collection? Then yes, no brainer. The Vita was an amazing device that sadly didn't get enough love, and it still holds up really well. Especially with the recent advancements in the homebrew scene, this is, in my opinion, the best time to invest. They really aren't that expensive, especially if you get a used one from Japan, which in my experience, used Japanese devices are just really well kept, and you're not going to have a bad time. Get the Vita to SD card, homebrew it, put all your games on it that you want to play, and have fun customizing it. You're going to love your Vita just like I love mine, and I can't recommend it enough. That's going to do it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned for more gaming and retro gaming content, And thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a great day. Peace out.